You good to go? Let's go. Asha, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Thanks for joining us again. The topic today is mental health. Please, go ahead. Very excited to know.
I'm glad that you are phrasing it as mental health. So often I get asked to speak about mental illness, and mental health is what we need to be speaking more of, looking at what we can do in terms of enhancing our mental health individually, collectively, because how we are as a person will extend how we are, how we relate to our communities, how we relate to our societies, and how we relate to the greater wider world. So it does start with us as an individual.
Am I wrong in understanding that there is lots of mental health challenges these days, and everybody goes through that?
Yes, I think that we are all struggling. You and I, we all struggle. We all struggle in different degrees, different ways. One person's struggle cannot be measured against another individual struggle. But mental health, mental illness, mental challenges, let's rather say, is really on the increase. And of course, the top two conditions is anxiety and depression. We're seeing a high rise and increase in these conditions. And of course, younger and younger, we see children being diagnosed, young adolescents being diagnosed with these conditions as well. And we need to stop and pause and say, we need to be asking the more deeper questions on these topics. Why is it that we are seeing a rise in mental challenges? When I think about our mental challenges, I think what I'm seeing is that we as human beings, we know the term post-traumatic stress disorder. That's when we go through a trauma and we have recurring thoughts and experiences, or even very uncomfortable flashbacks about it. But I thought about this the other day, and I think that what I see is that there's a present traumatic stress that happens, where people are coming in to see me, and whether it's a breakup, whether it's not being able to communicate with a family member, or a conflict with a work colleague, or a change in circumstances in a job, it's huge, it's traumatic. So I think that we are experiencing something that I would phrase as present trauma, present traumatic stress that is becoming ripe, and we're experiencing this stress and this anxiety and this depression as trauma. It's something that really impacts on us. Of course, when we think about mental challenges, the word that is often associated with mental challenges is always going back to trauma. And I think as much as we understand trauma as significant events, maybe, for example, a death of a family member, maybe a traumatic incident in our childhood, abuse, these are just some examples. But if we look at trauma, I think what I find, there's a lot of trauma rooted in the experience of neglect, abandonment, isolation, and rejection. And if we think about that, I think every human being that I've had a conversation with have in some way experienced at least one of those four, an experience of that. And there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of conversation that needs to happen on that. Not to say that the other bigger traumas are irrelevant, but these traumas, I think, play a very significant role in our overall mental well-being. Those kind of experiences in either through our childhood, or a possible betrayal, or an experience in life that gives us that experience of either feeling rejected or isolated or abandoned or neglected in some way or another.
Are we weaker individuals right now? Generations before us, they did not complain as much. I know I'm using a very strong word. I know I am. But I just wanted to know, are we getting weaker every single time? Are we getting soft? Mental health is very, very essential. There's no doubt about that. I am for mental health. But at times, there are many situations where individuals use it as an excuse. Oh, no, I can't do this because I can't work like this way because it affects my mental health. It's challenging times right now.
Absolutely.
For the company, for the individuals, for every single one. And if anyone asks a little bit more, then if these kind of excuses are given, wherein that individual is not really suffering from, but just because it is a threat at the moment. And I would say mental health is a threat to humanity, to society. But to use that just to get away from, that is why I use. Are we being soft?
I wouldn't want to say we either soft, weaker, or stronger. I think that we need to look at how are we managing ourselves, self-management. I think so often we are trying to manage time. And can we possibly manage time? The time is just ticking away, but yet we speak so much about time management, and it's more about self-management. And that I think that we are missing the fundamentals of well-being. And, you know, if we don't have the fundamentals, which we can talk about, we can easily feel as if we are incapable of doing the most, for some people, the most mundane tasks. Like waking up in the morning, we just don't feel a sense of energy. And I don't know if you know, if we can say that some people use it as an excuse. I'm sure, you know, there may be, but I think that people are genuinely struggling with the most simple, basic aspects of just being human and experiencing living. And the fundamentals of well-being, you know, we go right back to the foundation of oneself, which is firstly our diet. We need to look at, you know, the diet, what we take into our body. That plays a very, very important role, because food is medicine in terms of our diet and our food and what we take in. And when I speak about food, it's not only what we take in through, you know, we digest with food, but also what we take in from what we read, what we see, what we smell, all our senses. We are human beings where we are taking in from our environment, and that plays a role. So food, of course, is a fundamental, our diet, because there's so much that we need to look at in terms of our nutrition and how it relates to mental health. And then, of course, we need to look at our sleep. People are struggling in terms of sleep, and the body calls for that rest. It's the one place where we feel nourished and nurtured and rejuvenated, and sleep is certainly a health crisis. More and more people are finding it difficult to sleep, and that's a fundamental of well-being. If you're trying to attend to a task and you haven't had a good sleep, you are going to try and avoid the task. You're going to feel a lack of concentration, a lack of focus. You're going to feel incapable in some way or another. So that's another crisis on its own. The next simple thing is just movement of the body. Simple, that most people are trying to sort of take shortcuts on. And we need to move this vehicle that carries everything in us, the vehicle as in the body. We need to honor and nurture the body. And when we move it, that really helps us in terms of, you know, releasing chemicals that are so good for our bodies. There's so much research on the importance of movement in our bodies for our mental well-being. But so often people see it as a chore. So they become goal-directed in terms of exercising, that they are not even really connecting with their bodies. It's just another tick box. And we cannot certainly become mentally well when we're trying to tick box things. Often also, I mean, I get asked to do talks and workshops, and it's like, let's talk about mental well-being and let's cut it within an hour. But the reality is that we need an ongoing conversation to really see change. Because let's face it, there's enough information out there. We can Google, walk into a bookstore. There's enough information about everything, every topic. We are in the information age, knowledge at our disposal. So the bigger question, if there's so much knowledge and so much information out there, why are we still struggling? And that's a question that we need to look deeply together. Because when it comes to mental health, if you look at the word mental illness, illness starts with the word I. But in order to get to the place of mental wellness, we need a sense of we. And that means a greater, bigger picture. We need to look at our societies, the well-being of our societies, the well-being of our communities, and it starts with ourselves. I think that we need to, as I say, go back to the basics and look at our foundations. I mentioned 3 of the basic fundamentals of well-being, but another one is, of course, just practicing gratitude and connecting with our nature. There's so much we can learn from nature around us. There's so much order in nature, and we can just stop and pause and embrace simple pleasures in life. I think it's a start to experiencing that energized self. Because if we do not feel energized in our bodies, we're not going to feel energized in our mind. So the simple start is, if you are needing help, seek out the help. Communicate. Be okay. Become comfortable with the uncomfortable. I think that so many people sit with fear of how they will be seen or how will they be viewed if they seek out help. But, it's about putting yourself in a position where you can be vulnerable and speak about it. We need that sense of sharing because we need empathy, we need compassion for each other. But it starts with also having compassion with yourself before we can even build compassion on a more bigger global scale.
And last episode you spoke about everything is related, relationships between everything. So this actually reminded me of that when you said the 3 basics, that's the food, sleep, and exercise, and you also mentioned nature with it.
Yes.
So yes, very, very true. Because it cannot be just one thing. It's a mixture of so many things. If a person's going through depression because of the place that they are right now, and they are not going through depression or going towards, it's like they're very demotivated. They want to just get out of that place. They have self-doubts. What is your advice to them? And this could be at workplace, in wherever they are in life, whatever position they are in. How do you encourage one to stay stronger?
So remember when I spoke about when people sort of think way ahead and create scenarios, I think sometimes we just need to make it more simple and ask ourselves simple question, what is just the next step? Sometimes you can ask someone, where are you going? And they may say, I don't know. But if you know your very next step, however big or small it is, that can just be the foundation of a whole journey of recovery. And the next step could be, for the person that is depressed, even just asking for help. A simple thing of just getting out of the bed in the morning, one simple thing like that is huge for someone that is feeling depressed or having to connect with someone that they really want to speak to. So sometimes we need to really just go back to the basics and start small. Because if it's not manageable and it's not small, it's too much. Because remember, the depressed person doesn't feel motivated. They don't feel enthusiastic, or sometimes there's hardly any hope for what is the possibility to come. So just the little next step plays a big role for that individual. And we must remember that we go through a life where there's ups and downs. So when we are experiencing a deep sense of depression or anxiety or any emotion that we feel, I think it can possibly also help us to develop the capacity to experience the opposite of that, because at some point in your life you've experienced the opposite of that emotion or that experience. So if we dig deep and really look at it, we'll find that experience of the opposite of depression, even if it was just a moment. So I think keeping it simple, and I think so often I just ask the simple question. So you may not know the outcome or the clear direction, but just what is the next step for this moment?
When it comes to mental health, not many people are open to going or seeking professional help, as you mentioned earlier. So they tend to speak out to friends or relatives, and at times they are not the experts to speak to, and at times they don't know what to say. So if anyone would approach said relative, what do you think is the best thing to say from a relative or a friend in order to encourage?
I think sometimes we need to say less and listen more, because the listening is so important. Because in the word listen is silent. If you look at the word listen and unscramble the letters, it gets to silent. Sometimes if we can just pause and honor the space that someone has actually come forward and sort of opened up and they're willing to speak. So the first step is to listen, because as I say, that listening is so powerful. And what to say, again, we can't overthink that. When we are thinking about what is it that we need to say, we're not connecting from the heart. And we need to connect from the heart, and that requires spontaneous connection in terms of spontaneous faith, spontaneous trust in the conversation, spontaneous engagement and connection. We can't continue to think, how are we going to connect? What are we going to say? Because it's like almost that we are trying to, again, tick a box. We need to do it from a more natural state. And perhaps that's where the downfall is. We are not being natural. We are keeping up with being normal, like keeping up with the norms, which I would say is our normal these days. Normal means keeping up with our norms, keeping up with our expectations and our standards of our conditioned self, of our value systems, or everything that we've been taught. And I think sometimes it can take us away from being natural. And when you are natural, then you are not being normal. That's the normal is just all the norms that can sometimes make us feel quite entrapped and imprisoned within ourselves. So just tap into that spontaneity, that connection that comes so naturally. And if you don't know what to say, you can also just say, I don't know what to say. Just be real. Yeah, but it has to be natural. Where there's emotional resonance, it becomes effortless. And remember, in that listening and that silence, there's connection. Sometimes words create a lot of problems because words itself hold so much power. We think we use language. I think language uses us. And sometimes, if you walk into a room, I think your energy introduces you before you speak. So sometimes maybe there's no need for words, just to connect with an energetic interchange of energy between two people that is so much more powerful. Because words we can misinterpret, we can create our own perception of it, our own reality of it, and it can distort conversations and understandings that can, again, cause more problems. So if we can pause, stop, feel more. If we get out of our head, we feel more.
So if anyone wants to ask Asha, they can always reach out to your website and your social handles, which I'm going to put in the description. Thank you so much for your time again, Asha.
Only a pleasure.